Wyoming Territory, 1882. He almost didn't stop. Silas Brandt, 52 years old, had been driving the wagon back from Clearwater since noon, and the sky had been lying to him about the weather the entire way. Pale blue until the ridge, then dropping fast once he cleared the high ground. The temperature had fallen 10 degrees in the last hour. He had flour and wire and a box of salt to get back to the farm before the cold settled in properly, and he was 2 miles from home and intending to cover them. Then he saw them at the side of the road. A woman and a boy. She was standing with her back to the north wind, which had started coming down hard off the mountains, holding the boy's hand in the specific way of a woman who has been holding it for a very long time and is not going to let go. The boy was perhaps 7 years old, small-faced and serious, with a coat too thin for October in Wyoming Territory and boots that had been re-soled once already. Silas pulled the horse to a stop. The woman looked up. She was young, 26. He would learn, though she looked older in the way that grief adds years to a face before it adds lines. Her eyes were brown and doing the same calculation most women's eyes did when a strange man stopped on a road, assessing the threat before allowing the relief. "You need a ride," he said. It was not quite a question. "We're fine," she said. The boy looked at the wagon and said nothing. Silas looked at the sky, at the north wind picking up, at the boy's thin coat. "The cold's coming in hard tonight," he said. "My farm is 2 miles south. I have a barn and a fire." She looked at the road ahead, which offered nothing but distance. "We can sleep in the barn," she said. He held out his hand. "You can sleep in the house." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took his hand and helped the boy up first, the way you do when the person who matters most to you is 7 years old and can't reach the bench on his own. The Brandt farmhouse had been built for 2 people and lived in by 1 for 5 years. Silas kept it the way a man keeps something he respects, but has stopped expecting anything from. Clean, functional, the kind of maintained that has no softness to it. The curtains were plain. The table had 1 chair pushed back from where he always sat. There were 2 hooks by the door and only 1 coat on them. And on the shelf above the fireplace, beside the clock his father had left him, there was a black leather medical bag. Closed. The clasp was tarnished. There was a thin film of dust on the top that had been accumulating for 5 years. Iris Finch noticed it in the first minute. She was the kind of woman who noticed things quietly and filed them without comment, not detachment, but efficiency. The habit of a person who had learned to read situations quickly because the cost of misreading them was too high. She did not ask about the bag. She asked about the boy. Can he have something warm to drink? Silas went to the kitchen. He had broth and bread and a pot of beans on the back of the stove. He made what was available. The boy, Emmett, she called him, Emmett Finch, 7 years old, sat at the table and looked around the kitchen with the careful attention of a child trying to understand a new place before deciding what to do in it. He's doing an inventory, Silas thought, same as his mother. "You don't have to tell me anything," Silas said when they sat down. She looked at him across the table. "About where you're going or where you came from," he said. "Not tonight." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Emmett, say thank you." "Thank you," Emmett said. His voice was small and careful, the voice of a boy who had learned to use words sparingly. Silas nodded at him. "That's a good coat." Emmett looked down at his coat. "My dad gave it to me." Silas received this without looking away. He had good taste. Emmett considered this and went back to his broth. They ate mostly in silence, the kind that happens between strangers who are too tired for conversation, but not uncomfortable enough to fill it with noise. Outside, the wind was up. Inside, the fire was enough. After Emmett was asleep in the spare room, with her dry shawl tucked over his feet, Iris came back to the kitchen and stood in the doorway. "His name was Caleb," she said. He died 8 months ago, a mine collapse near Laramie. He was 31. She sat down. She folded her hands on the table the way you fold them when you're not sure they'll stay still otherwise. He had a mining claim, small but viable. His brother, Warren, he's been after it since Caleb first filed. 3 weeks after the funeral, there was a letter, a teaching position in Boise City. Good wages, housing provided. She looked at her hands. I found out 2 weeks later that the letter was not real. There is no position. There is no schoolhouse. She did not say what she did not have to say. That Warren had sent it to move her out of the way. That she had figured it out before she reached Boise. That she had been trying to find somewhere to stop ever since. How far behind you is he? Silas said. She thought about the days. 4, maybe 5. Silas nodded slowly. Does he have a legal document? He says he does. Something from Carbon County. Carbon County has no jurisdiction in Uinta County, Silas said. She looked at him. I was a doctor, he said. Army surgeon. You spend enough time on posts with contested land and you learn where one court ends and another begins. He held her gaze. Whatever he's carrying means nothing here unless our justice of the peace decides to honor it. And he won't if he hears your account first. He paused. Clement Alderman has been our justice for 14 years. I've known him since 1873. Let me go see him tomorrow morning, before Warren gets to town. She was quiet. He could see her weighing it. The particular hesitation of a woman who has learned that accepting help is never a simple transaction. You don't have to explain why it's hard, he said. She looked at him. I know what it costs, he said simply. You don't owe me your trust because I gave you soup. Then why are you offering, she said. He looked at the table. He thought about what was true and how to say it without making it larger than it was. My father told me a man who can help and doesn't is answering a question about himself, he said. I've been trying to give a decent answer since I was 20. That's all. She was still for a moment. Then go in the morning, early. He nodded. He went to the chair in the main room, and that was where he was when the fever came. It came at 2 in the morning. Iris woke to Emmett hot against her side, the dry, papery heat that every mother learns to recognize in the dark. She checked him quickly. Breathing, color, the small face flushed and unhappy. Sick, but not critical. She needed cool water and something she didn't have. She went to the kitchen as quietly as she could. She was at the basin when the light changed behind her. Silas stood in the doorway with a lamp, still in his work clothes. He had been sleeping in the chair. She said, keeping her voice low, Fever, I need cool water and… She stopped. She was looking at the shelf above the fireplace, at the black leather bag. Silas followed her gaze. Neither of them spoke for a moment. You were a doctor, she said. I was. Can you? Yes. He was already moving toward the shelf. He took the bag down in both hands and held it for a moment, the way you hold something you have not touched in a very long time. The clasp was stiff. He worked it open. The inside was in order. He had kept it that way, though he had not opened it. Some habits are too trained to abandon even when you are trying to abandon everything else. He went to Emmett. The boy was awake and unhappy, and looked at Silas with the expression of a 7-year-old who has decided that all adults are collectively responsible for whatever is wrong and expects one of them to fix it. Silas examined him with the particular calm of a man who knows what fear looks like in a child and knows that showing his own helps no one. Not serious, he said, but he needs the night watched. He sat in the chair in the corner. Iris did not tell him to leave. She put damp cloths on Emmett's forehead and talked to him the way you talk to a sick child. Not in words exactly, but in the sound of a voice that means you are not alone in this. Emmett held her hand and looked at Silas from time to time with the evaluating gaze of a boy who is deciding something about a person. Past 3 in the morning, Emmett said, "What's in the bag?" "Doctor's things," Silas said. "Are you a doctor?" Silas looked at the bag, open on the floor beside his chair. "I used to be." Emmett considered this. "Why did you stop?" "I lost someone," Silas said, "and for a while I thought being a doctor was the reason I lost her. So I stopped." Emmett looked at him with the uncomplicated attention of a child who has not yet learned to find this kind of honesty uncomfortable. "Was it?" he said. "No," Silas said, "it wasn't." Emmett nodded and closed his eyes. Iris looked across the room at Silas. He was looking at the bag. In the lamplight, his face held the expression of a man who has just said something true out loud for the first time and is hearing it settle into the air between them. She did not speak. Sometimes the right response to a man arriving somewhere is simply to let him arrive. At 4 in the morning, Emmett's fever broke. He slept deeply, the sound sleep of a body that has finished what it was doing. Iris straightened and felt the ache in her back from hours of sitting forward. She turned. Silas was watching. "He's going to be fine," she said. "I know." He paused. "Hannah had a fever," he said, 5 years ago. February. I was the best trained doctor within 40 miles, and I couldn't." He stopped. "I thought if I never opened that bag again, it meant something. I don't know what. But I kept it closed." She looked at him across the small room. This 52-year-old man who had taken a bag down from a shelf in the middle of the night because a 7-year-old boy needed what was inside it. "It meant you were still a doctor," she said quietly, "even when you were trying not to be." He looked at the fire. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Get some sleep. I'll keep the lamp." She lay down beside Emmett. The fire was warm and the lamp was low, and the Wyoming Territory night was enormous outside. Inside there was warmth and a child sleeping, and a man in a corner chair with a black leather bag open on the floor beside him. It was enough for tonight. It was enough. "Before I go on, I want to say something directly to you. If you're listening to Silas and Iris right now, you're probably somewhere in the middle of something yourself. Maybe you're driving home. Maybe you're folding laundry in the quiet after everyone else has gone to bed. Maybe you're on a long road with nothing but this voice for company. That is exactly what Prairie Hearts is for. If this story is keeping you company tonight, leave a like. It takes 2 seconds and it means more than you know. And tell me in the comments where you are right now while you listen. Your city, your state, your country. I read every single one, and I am always glad to know how far these voices travel. Now, let's go back, because Silas has to ride to see Clement Alderman, and Warren Finch is 4 days behind. Silas went to see the justice of the peace before the morning light had fully settled across the valley. He told Clement Alderman what Iris had told him: Caleb's death, the mining claim, the forged letter, Warren's pursuit. He told it in order, without embellishment, with the specific clarity of a man who knows the truth is strongest when it needs no decoration. Clement listened. He asked 2 questions. Then he said, "Bring her to me this afternoon. I want to hear it from her directly." Silas went back. He found Iris in the kitchen with Emmett, who was pale but upright and had undertaken a thorough investigation of the cabinet where Silas kept his fishing tackle. She looked at Silas when he came through the door with the question already in her face. "He wants to hear from you," Silas said. "This afternoon. Your account, not mine." He paused. "It's your claim and your son and your name. Clement is fair, but he won't act on my word alone. He shouldn't. Your voice matters more than mine in this room." Something shifted in her face, not surprise, but recognition. The recognition of a woman who has spent 8 months having decisions made around her and is being handed something back. "I'll be ready," she said. She was. She sat across from Clement Alderman that afternoon and told her account. Caleb, the collapse, the claim, the letter, Warren's paper, 8 months of moving. She told it clearly, without asking for sympathy, the way a person tells something they have been carrying and have decided to set down in the right place. Clement asked 4 questions. Then he said, "Mrs. Finch, a Carbon County document carries no binding authority in Uintah County. I am not obligated to honor it without a formal hearing in this jurisdiction. If Warren Finch presents himself here, he will be heard, and so will you equally before me." He held her gaze. "You have my word." Warren Finch arrived the following morning. He came with one man beside him and a document in his coat pocket, and the particular confidence of a person who has not yet encountered the limits of his own authority. He got down from his horse in the yard. Silas was near the barn. Iris was on the porch, not hiding because Silas had not asked her to. Warren looked at Silas, then at Iris, then back at Silas. "That's my brother's wife," he said, "and my brother's son. I have a legal—" "You have a Carbon County document," Iris said. She had come down the porch steps and was standing in the yard. Her voice was level. Emmett was not on the porch. She had asked Mrs. Stanhope, Silas's neighbor, to take him for the morning, and Mrs. Stanhope, who had formed her own sharp views about the situation the moment she heard it, had agreed without hesitation. "The document is unenforceable here," Iris continued. "Justice Alderman has confirmed this. Caleb registered that claim. He left it to Emmett and me." Her voice did not change. "You paid for Caleb's coffin. I am grateful. You did not purchase my son with it." She held his gaze. "If you have a legal claim to that property, present it to Clement Alderman at a proper hearing. That is the process. It is the only process I will participate in." Warren looked at the man beside him. The man was studying the middle distance with the expression of someone who agreed to accompany a document and is now quietly reassessing the document. Silas stepped forward. He stood beside Iris, not in front of her. "Clement Alderman is available this week if you want to file formally," Silas said. "That's what's available to you here." Warren looked at Iris once more. At whatever he had written 4 days to take, and the specific impossibility of taking it from a woman standing in a yard, telling him exactly what the law said, and meaning every word of it. He got back on his horse. The other man did the same. He rode down the track without looking back. The yard went quiet. Even Emmett's horse, watching from the fence, seemed to take a breath. Silas stood beside Iris and looked at the road where Warren had gone. "You didn't need me there," he said. "No," she said, "but I was glad you were." She turned to look at him. He looked at her. "Ask me," she said. He understood what she was asking. He turned his hat in his hands. "Would you still want to stay?" "If there were no Warren, if there were no document, if it were just this, the farm and the October and the 2 miles of road." She held his gaze. "Ask me properly." He took a breath. "Iris," he said, "will you stay?" She looked at the valley, at the farm and the mountains and the October light going long across the grass. She was 26 years old, and she had been moving for 8 months, and she was standing in a yard in Wyoming Territory next to a 52-year-old man who had opened a bag he kept shut for 5 years and stood beside her, not in front of her, when it counted. "Yes," she said, the way she said everything that mattered. Warren Finch did not return. He presented himself to Clement Alderman the following week. Clement received him politely, told him the document was unenforceable without a formal local filing, and indicated the process would take a minimum of 6 months and was not likely to succeed. Warren left the territory in November. In December, a letter arrived from a clerk in Laramie who had recorded Caleb's original claim and had been troubled by Warren's maneuvering since the beginning. He confirmed in writing that the claim had been registered solely to Caleb, Iris, and their heirs, that the forged letter had been traced, that 2 witnesses were prepared to testify if proceedings were ever opened. He had been waiting, he wrote, for a safe address to send it to. Iris read the letter at the kitchen table. She looked at Silas. "He kept records," she said. Honest people usually do, Silas said. She folded the letter and put it in the drawer where she kept Emmett's documents. Then she made coffee, and they talked about what to do with the claim. Whether to hold it, whether Emmett should one day decide for himself. It's his, Iris said. He should decide. Yes, Silas said, he should. The winter came in the way of Wyoming winters, hard and clean, closing the world down to the immediate and the warm. There was an evening in February when Silas came in from the south fence to find Emmett at the kitchen table with the black leather medical bag open in front of him. Looking at the instruments the way a 7-year-old looks at something he has decided is enormously important. Silas stopped in the doorway. Emmett looked up. "Can I look?" Silas looked at the bag, at the instruments he had kept clean and ordered for 5 years inside a closed clasp. He came and sat down across from Emmett. "Yes," he said, "let me show you what each one does." Emmett leaned forward. Iris stood in the kitchen doorway and watched the two of them, a 52-year-old man explaining a stethoscope to a 7-year-old boy, and felt the particular shift of something finding its right place after a long time away from it. They married in March in the small church in Milford, on a Saturday morning with the Wyoming Territory sky clear and cold, and the first suggestion of spring coming off the southern slopes. Clement Alderman was in the second row. Mrs. Stanhope had arrived before anyone else, and considered this entirely her right. Emmett stood beside Silas during the ceremony with the serious dignity of a 7-year-old who has been given an important role and intends to perform it without error. At the end, he reached up and took Silas's hand without being asked, the way a child reaches for something he has already decided belongs to him. Silas held it. On a night in October, a full year after the road and the north wind and the wagon bench and the barn she never ended up sleeping in, Iris sat at the kitchen table with Emmett's school primer open in front of her and looked up at Silas, who was reading by the fire. He had not turned a page in 12 minutes. She watched him for a moment. "Silas," she said. He looked up. She looked at the table. She looked at the black leather bag on its shelf. Open now, used again, a thing returned to its purpose. She looked at him. "If it's a girl," she said. He went very still. "Hannah," she said quietly, "if you want, not because it replaces anything, because the name belongs in this house." He was quiet for a long moment. Something arrived in his face, not surprise, but the expression of a thing that has been possible for some time and has now become real. He set the book down entirely. He looked at the fire. He looked at the bag. He looked at her with the eyes that had been steady and direct since a cold October road a year ago when he had almost driven past 2 people and had chosen not to. "Hannah," he said, "it does." She went back to the primer. He picked up his book. The fire was warm and Emmett was asleep down the hall, and the Wyoming Territory October night was wide and dark outside, and the house was exactly the right size, and the name Hannah was in the room with them, no longer only the weight of what had been lost, but also the shape of what was coming. And that was completely and entirely right. Silas Brandt had kept that bag closed for 5 years because opening it felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. He had kept it dusted and clasped and set aside on a shelf where he could see it every day and never touch it. It took a 6-7-year-old boy, a woman with brown eyes who noticed everything and commented on nothing, and one long night in October to show him what it had always been. Not evidence of his failure. Not proof of what he'd lost. Just a bag, waiting for him to be ready to pick it up again. May that be true of whatever you have put away. If this story found you tonight, if you're in Tennessee or Texas or the Philippines or somewhere I've never heard of, leave a comment and tell me where you are. I read everyone, and I am always glad to know how far these voices travel. May God bless each of you who listened all the way to the last word. Until next time, keep writing.